Hello and welcome to the new Pickleballers podcast, where we talk about professional pickleball players, paddles, game strategy, pretty much everything that has to do with the number one growing sport in America. I'm your host, Jeff Flowers, and this is episode 1. So I will start by addressing the elephant in the car. When you're obsessed with pickleball, your free time is a priority. Just so you're aware, my priorities are my family, my job, because I need to have money to live, and then it's kind of pickleball. So pretty much that's the order of things. Luckily, my wife is also semi-obsessed with pickleball, I would say, so that helps. I've got one of my kids obsessed with pickleball. The other one has no interest in it at all. So anyways, I commute about 2 hours for work each day, so I'm using my free time in my commute. Sorry, there's a truck there. That's going to happen. I use the free time in my commute to do this podcast. So welcome. Thanks for watching or listening wherever you're at. Episode 1, let's just get right into it. What is pickleball? So it's got to be, you've got to be living under a rock to not know about pickleball, hear about it. They just did the first televised tournament a week ago, I think it was, in California. It was televised on CBS, so it was a national network, picked up a live stream. It's been on the tennis channel. It's, like I said, it's the fastest growing sport in America. You've got retired professional athletes playing it. You've got actors. Jamie Foxx is into it. Leonardo DiCaprio. So it's really growing. So, but if you haven't heard of it, you don't know what it is, I'm just going to kind of explain it to you. It's a paddle sport similar to tennis and or ping pong, but you're playing it outdoor on a court. And you use, it started with wooden paddles. Now all the paddles, of course, are fiberglass and carbon fiber, and you basically are hitting a wiffle ball. I'll give you a little bit of history about it. Google me for the facts and the dates. I don't have all this information. I don't have a carpool karaoke, late show kind of budget and research staff, but it was Bainbridge, Washington, I believe, an island off of the coast of Washington, and a family was, sitting around. This was, I think it was in the 1950s. And the kids were bored, so the dad was just like, oh man, in my day, we would just make up games. We would find something to do. And so he went out. They had an old badminton court at their lake house, and he took the net, strung it across the ground like a tennis net. And I think they cut some paddles or made some paddles out of basically plywood. So very crude paddles. A handle, a paddle, a hitting surface, and grabbed a wiffle ball, like a baseball wiffle ball, kid's ball, and just kind of started hitting and made up some rules. So, it kind of started as a tennis-like sport. They started adding rules about what they call the kitchen or the non-volley zone. And so that's 7 feet from either side of the net, where you can't go into the kitchen to hit the ball unless the ball bounces in the kitchen. And just to clarify too, my wife didn't know this for several months when we'd been playing. She thought you could never go in the kitchen unless it bounced in the kitchen, but you can go in the kitchen, you just can't hit the ball out of the kitchen. So if you're in the kitchen and a ball comes at you, you cannot hit it out of the air, you would have to let it bounce. Or if the ball actually hits you and you're in the kitchen, that's your opponent's point. So anyways, they started adding rules like that. They also have the 2 bounce rule. So the serving team serves the ball, it has to bounce, and then the returning team hits it, and the serving team has to let it bounce. So it's 2 bounce rule, and then after that, it's just free play. Anybody, either team can hit the ball out of the air, they can hit it after 1 bounce, can't bounce twice, and that's pretty much the general rules. Both teams get to serve, except for the very first serve, which is confusing for people, but the very first side will serve. They'll call the score as 0-0-2 or 0-0 start because they're the second server. If they get a point, then they switch sides on the court. And so that's why they do the 1 and the 2 at the end of the score. That helps you keep track of which server you are. and you only score points when you're serving. So if you don't serve, you have to get 2 side outs against your opponents before you get the ball back, and then you get to serve, and that's your opportunity to get points. So I think I saw a stat that said like 55% of points are won by the receiving team, because they have the advantage because of that 2 bounce rule. If you watch pros play, or if you watch even intermediate players play, generally everyone is at the kitchen line or the non-volley zone line. It cuts down all the corners, and it gives you less court to deal with. And so you'll see it's the serve, it's their turn, and then pretty much everybody's trying to get to that non-volley zone line to play the match out. So there's a lot of dinking involved. Dink is just a soft shot over the net that it lands in the kitchen generally, and it doesn't bounce high enough for your opponents to smash it over the net generally. So they have to hit it up, which again is another dink. So kind of the game there's a lot of strategy involved in trying to hit it softly and move your opponents to open up spaces on the court where it's open, where you can hit it. So that's kind of the game in a nutshell. So obviously back to this family. So this family started the game. They were playing it on this island, and they just had friends that started playing it, and it just got to be something that they really enjoyed. And then when they'd go back, this was in the summers, and then when they'd go back home for the winter, they wanted to play it in, not on at their lake house, and so they were playing it in the street. And it just so happened the street was 20 feet wide. So the court dimensions are 20 feet wide by 44 feet long. You have the non-volley zones, which are 7 feet from each net, or from the net, 7 feet each direction, and then from the non-volley zone back to the baseline, it's 15 feet on each side. So they would play it in the street, and it was kind of like the Wayne's World thing, where they'd have the net, and the car would come up, and they'd be like, "Game off," and they'd move the net out of the way and let the cars through, and then they'd put the net back. And so it just kind of started growing like that in that area. And then obviously over the last 70 years or whatever, it's really grown, and it's kind of always just been more seen as a sport that older people play. There's obviously less running than tennis. They say that the court, pickleball court, is about a quarter of the size of a full doubles tennis court, if you think about it like that. So it's quite a bit smaller, so there's not really a lot of running per se, but there's still one of the newer shots that's kind of getting more use in the pro circuit is a lob, where everyone's at the kitchen line and someone will lob it over, and then you're sprinting back to the baseline to return this lob. And so there is, it can be very active, but it's not a lot of long running. But there are also longer points because you've got a softer ball that kind of floats a little bit. It's a little easier to get to, I would say. There can be like 80 shot rallies, and that's kind of the extreme. I would say probably 30 or 40 maybe is more normal. Even as an amateur, we've had shot rallies that are probably 30 or 40 shots, and that's a lot. I mean, generally it's maybe 10, but if both teams are doing a good job of dinking and getting balls that are difficult shots, but getting them back over and keeping the rally alive, you can have a pretty good long rally. So I think there were 3 different people that are kind of known as the founders, and they call this court, where they first started in Bainbridge on this island, they call it Court 1. And I guess you can go there and actually see it. They've got a plaque to memorialize the founders of the game, which is really cool. I've not done that. I live in Kansas City. I haven't mentioned that yet. But so it's just really a fun game. It is very easy to go and just play, and it's easier than tennis to just hit the ball over and get it in. So people who've never played a racket sport can go and hit it in, and you can pretty much play a game with people their first time. If they're like, decently athletic, have a little bit of hand-eye coordination, you can go and you can play a whole game and they'll have a great time. even people who don't have racket sports backgrounds, if you give them a ball that's like up over their head, you know, it's not that hard for them to smash it down and get it in, and they feel pretty successful. So when you start, it can be very like, I think that's what's the addicting draw to it, is that it doesn't take a lot of you know, it doesn't take a lot of athleticism, I guess, or racket sports history to make you feel like you're, hey, I'm pretty good at this right off the bat. But you quickly learn when you start playing better players, it's all about position and pace of the ball. Like they'll slow balls down or speed them up, and when you're not expecting it, and you're so close to each other, it doesn't seem like, you know, you're 15 feet away, 14 feet away, basically, if you're all at the non-volley zone line. But when you're hitting back and forth, and when somebody slows it down or speeds it up, it can throw off your timing and make it difficult to return it. You can be ahead of it or behind the ball. And so it's interesting that, I mean, it's kind of like, I guess there are a lot of places popping up, like Chicken and Pickle is a place we have that started actually here in Kansas City, and they're growing all over now. I think they're in like Texas, Oklahoma, like they're just popping up everywhere. And it's kind of that format where you can show up and be an amateur and never have played before. They've got paddles, they've got balls, they've got good food and drink. So you can show up and play for an hour and, you know, have a great time. So that's obviously helped as well with the sport's popularity. It's kind of like a Top Golf, you know, destination or event. You know, you have work events, parties, things like that would be there as well. A little background about how I started playing. So I just started playing in January of 2022. I think it was technically New Year's Eve day, if I remember. I had the day off from work. The local gym that we go to has pickleball in the mornings, and I knew they had that. We had kind of heard about it and didn't really know a lot about it, but my son had actually played in PE class, and he'd kind of been talking about it. Oh, we played in PE, and he's 6'1", 6'2" freshman, and had played a little bit of tennis, and so he's like, oh, I dominated everybody. And so we were laughing about his you know, his kind of he was very braggadocious about his accomplishments. And so it just was around that time I had time off, and so I was like, oh, I'm gonna go and play. So I went up to the front desk. I didn't even have a paddle, asked if I could borrow a paddle, and they hand me this wooden paddle. I mean, it looks like a sheet of plywood that's been cut and slightly sanded, and a little bit of grip tape, and then it's got a strap on the end that you wrap around your wrist to make sure it doesn't fly off and kill someone, I'm sure. So I take this down, and in our place, they just stack paddles on the bench, meaning, you know, just they're stacked, and the next 2 or the next 4, next 3, whatever it is, would get up and play. We have 4 courts there, temporary courts indoors, and I just set my paddle down, and there were quite a few people playing that morning, and a guy asked me, hey, is this your paddle? And I said, yeah. And I said, I just borrowed it from up front. He's like, oh, you don't want to play with that thing. That thing's hard, and it's, you know, it's going to be hard. He's like, here, try one of these. And he reaches in his bag and pulls out like 3 different paddles. He's like, here, try one of these. And he's giving me different paddles to feel, and I have no clue. I honestly can't tell you. I don't remember who it was that let me borrow their paddle or what kind of paddle it was. I don't even remember, but I just set it down. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll play. And so I got up, and you know, they kind of had to explain the rules with the 2 bounce rule, and so you need to stay back when you're the serving team and stuff like that. But I picked it up pretty easily. I mean, I do have a background in racket sports. So growing up, I played racquetball. My dad was really into racquetball. We played at the local YMCA. I played in leagues and stuff when I was like 12, 13. I was playing in like C league. You know, there's D, it's like A, B, C, D. A is the best. So I was starting out at D. I think I played some C league or whatever. I was playing against adults, and we played quite a bit. So I played that growing up, and then when I got into high school, I was playing tennis. I wasn't great. I played like JV. My older brother played varsity, and so I played with him a lot, but it was something I didn't really do past my sophomore, junior year of high school. I don't even remember, but it was just always something I enjoyed to do too. So I had been playing with my wife and my sons. We'd been playing some tennis. Just even in the last couple of years, we'd gotten in some rackets, and it was just something we were doing kind of for fun. So, you know, the hand-eye coordination wasn't a problem. You know, getting the feel of hitting the ball down is obviously different because you're not used to hitting a wiffle ball. But had a great time. I'm pretty sure that was on a Friday, and I played for a couple hours or whatever it was, and told my wife all about it, of course, that night. The next day we went out to Dick's and bought some paddles. So we bought a set of like Monarch paddles, which is just kind of a entry-level paddle. 2 paddles, comes with a bag, comes with some balls, and we were using those. So we were playing, I think actually we might have gone and played other times, like off-peak times, and I was kind of teaching her the rules and stuff. And it wasn't long before my youngest son, who was 12 at the time, was interested in wanting to play with us. And so I think we got, I'm trying to remember, I think we just went and got another set of like Franklin wooden paddles, like $20 set of paddles at Target or something, just so we'd have 4 paddles. And we were kind of using those, playing with those with the boys or with whoever we could play with. And right around that same time, our church started doing a Friday night pickleball night. So we've got a basketball court, and they would do temporary courts. So they taped out 4 courts and had 4 nets. And so we were doing that on Friday nights. And it was a lot of fun. We had people from church that were newer, there were a couple people who were a little more experienced who were kind of helping everyone else figure it out. And we were doing that on Friday nights. But this was, winter in Kansas City, so we obviously couldn't play outside. So we were finding places to play inside. We found a great church that we play at on Tuesday, Thursday nights still, and they pretty much play from 7 to 10. It's 3 courts, rotating in and out, and pretty much most of the same people. You get different people, from time to time, or people who've been gone for a while that'll come back. But just a great place to learn the game and play with some better people, like some consistent games with some better people, and have a good time. So we ended up just starting to play a lot. I mean, we were playing, it was the winter, so we weren't quite as busy with like our kids' sports and things like that. But we were playing at least 4 times a week, I would say, sometimes more, because we play on the weekends too. We usually play a couple times during the week. And it didn't take long before we're like, oh, okay, we need some better paddles. So we stepped up to like kind of the high end of the box store paddles, was where we went to next. My 12-year-old was really into it at that point. So he's like, oh, well, I need a new paddle too. So we got him one as well. And still pretty much just the 3 of us were playing about any time we could. Once it started getting nice out, where we live, just outside of Kansas City, they built 4 new dedicated pickleball courts at a park not far from us. And we started going anytime we could. They had a Facebook page that talks about when you can go and play. So it's really been a fun game. We've met a ton of people. It gives you the opportunity to get out and exercise. It's a lot more fun than running, I would say. And like in a 3-hour, like if we go and play for 3 hours, I can burn like at least 2,500 calories. And that's even, like we're rotating in. So you might play a game, one game, we normally just play, like a game, and then you would rotate off depending on how busy it is. But one game would typically be about 15 minutes. I've played single games as long as 30 minutes. If it's a really good, like evenly matched game, you do a lot of back and forth because you can't score unless you're serving. And so the games can go on a while. But yeah, typically it's a 15-minute game. The other nice thing too that we have out here, a couple of parks have tennis courts, but they put pickleball lines down. So you can go and play, if there's no one playing tennis or there's no one playing pickleball, you can just go and play pickleball in those courts. The net height is similar. It's 36 inches at the corners. I think it's 34 inches in the center. So that's kind of like your typical tennis net where it's cinched down. But so there's generally a lot of places to play. A lot of areas are starting to pop up more courts as well. There are some, I'll just mention this now, podcast 1, people are complaining about the sound because it has a very kind of loud, distinct pop sound. I think the paddle manufacturers are starting to deal with that. It seems like a lot of the nicer, higher end paddles that I see other people playing with seem to have more of a dead sound to them. They don't like make as loud of a pop. Our paddles that we have that are still same ones we've had for a while now are kind of the high end big box store paddles. They're pretty like they're very distinct when you hit it. And so That is kind of an issue, and I get it. If I lived close to pickleball courts, I wouldn't want to be hearing that all the time. A lot of the courts don't, the outdoor courts don't have lights, so then you don't have people playing past 9 o'clock in the summer. But I actually play with some guys in a morning group before work, and we play at 6 a.m. And the park actually opens at 5. You couldn't even see at 5 o'clock in Kansas City, but at 6 o'clock you can. So we usually play from like 6 to 7:30, and there's other people there too. It's crazy. It's a place that's a little closer to my work that has got 8 courts, a great area. You know, just they've got their dedicated pickleball courts. They're all individually fenced, which is nice, so your balls aren't going into other people's courts. But it just makes it nice when you have facilities like that. But I understand the whole sound thing. I think, you know, people being respectful of that and not playing when you're not supposed to, you know, when they have hours set at the court, you know, abiding by that. And then obviously playing indoor, there's not really an issue with that. I don't think you would hear it through the gym walls, as far as I know anyways. So hey, that's a little bit of background about me. It's a little bit of background about pickleball, and I'm just gonna kind of do these podcasts. I'll talk about different things. I'll talk about pickleball pros, tournaments, recent tournaments. I'll talk about paddles, reviews, things like that. The nice thing with the paddles is there's some places that allow you to demo them. So I might do some paddle demos and just talk about the different features that paddles have. But thanks so much for watching or listening wherever you're at. And remember, if you're new, you can follow, subscribe. I've new Pickleballers basically on everything: TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. So feel free to check out my socials. And thanks so much for watching. Bye.